Hi, I'm Guy Powell, and welcome to the next episode of the Backstory on Marketing and AI. And if you haven't already done so, please visit ProRelevant.com and sign up for all of these episodes and podcasts. As you know, I am the author of the newly released book, The Post-COVID Marketing Machine: Prepare Your Team to Win. And you can find out more information and download the first chapter at marketingmachine.prorelevant.com. So, of course, AI and marketing is everything. And, there were rumors a couple of weeks ago that the AI wave has run its course. And I don't think that's the case. It is just beginning, and everyone seems to think that AI is going to well, it's not going to take over the world, but it might get close and certainly help in the marketing space. And one of the things that is on the minds of CMOs is their fear of missing out. We had a breakfast, and they were definitely worried about what's everybody else doing. And fascinatingly, everybody was kind of in the same boat. They're kind of making some strides here and there, but they haven't made any major steps. So with that, let's see if we can help you out today. And today we're going to learn about a whole bunch of new tools that will be important in the arsenal for top marketers. So we're going to be interviewing Pete Pachal, and he is with Media Copilot. And let me tell you a little bit about Pete. He is the founder and CEO of Media Copilot, where he writes about generative AI and how it is changing journalism, the media, and creative fields. He also teaches journalists and content creators how to use AI tools and consults with companies of all sizes on how to incorporate generative AI into real work. Pete has a long career in journalism and media, previously holding senior roles in global newsrooms such as CoinDesk and even Mashable. He also puts his encyclopedic knowledge of Doctor Who to work every week in his podcasts. And his podcast is Media Copilot. So, Pete, welcome. So good to have you.
Thanks. I do another podcast on Doctor Who called Pull to Open as well, but Media Copilot is where I talk about all the AI stuff, so it might be a little more relevant to your audience, except for a few.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Feel free to hit me up for Doctor Who trivia anytime.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I will do that as we're going through here. So, well, let's jump right in. So, Pete, what is your backstory on AI and marketing? How did you get involved?
Oh, yeah. Well, AI, I was hit over the head with it like everyone else at the end of 2022 when ChatGPT came out. But prior to that, I was a tech journalist and I was covering AI and lots of other tech for, 20 plus years. Certainly remember all the Google developer conferences, famously the one where they said they were all in an AI and they showed off an assistant that could actually call things like hair salons and restaurants and do things for you. It was a very kind of seminal moment in AI, and there was a lot of I would say hand wringing and freak out, and a little bit of people like, well, this is going too fast, and we haven't figured out the ethics of it. And I'll say this, I mean, Google kind of slowed down, and I don't know if that's to its credit as a entity in the world. It probably wasn't to its credit as a business because it definitely provided an opening for the likes of OpenAI and others to catch up. And it sort of inevitably, someone was going to create some generative system that could produce text. It was OpenAI that sort of captured the imagination. Now there's a lot of that out here, and since that day, I was actually working at CoinDesk at the time. Sort of scrambled an internal team after that. I was a chief of staff, and we talked about what our approach to AI should be, and should we use it in editorial? Should we use it in marketing? Should we use it in other departments? And so we had a community from people across the company. We figured out some use cases. We figured out some guidelines that were either still posted publicly. I authored them and prototyped some stuff, which was fun. And so when I left CoinDesk later that year, I knew that I really wanted to lean further into that. It was actually probably the most fun I'd had there, in terms of projects, was figuring out AI. So I founded the Media Copilot. This was last October, and I was determined to basically figure out how it's affecting media broadly, but also the professions of journalism, PR and communications, and marketing specifically. And I look at those trends both on a macro level, which is to say, what are the forces changing the marketplace, and how companies will run, particularly media companies, and sort of the new economies and standards that are coming out, and also the micro level. And with that, I really just immerse myself in tools, most days of the week, and there's so many. I'm immersed myself in this, and it's my full-time job. I still feel like I'm a beginner at so many of these platforms. But I pass on all of that knowledge in my newsletter as well as classes. So at the Media Copilot, we offer classes for, again, those professions, journalists, PR, and marketing. And we do everything from, we'll get you started in prompting and very specific prompting for your profession, all the way to very purpose-built tools, some of them very custom in terms of building your own AI tools. There's the tools for building tools. And we do it all like in a 3-hour class. And I can customize that class to various groups. I've taught marketing teams, branded marketing teams, PR teams, newsrooms on sort of the basics of AI and what tools work well for their profession. And so far, so good. Although
Yeah.
again, there's so many new tools every week. It's just whenever I think I've got something down, something new comes up, and yeah,
Yeah,
the AI
exactly.
world does not stop.
It's funny. There used to be that chart that had all the logos on it of all of the different advertising networks and all of the digital advertising tools. And now in almost the same way, there's going to be a similar chart that's going to have all the logos of all the different AI tools that are out there.
Oh,
And
no
yeah,
doubt.
definitely very confusing. So it's something now though where marketers and journalists and what have you just need to make sure they're bringing their AI to work. And so tell us about a little bit about workplace AI policy and what you see going on there, and maybe even slant it if possible for regulated versus non-regulated industries, because there's clearly some challenges that the regulated industries have.
Yeah, absolutely. So in any regulated industry where compliance is a big deal, there is a lot of nervousness in addition to the skepticism. There's definitely still some skepticism, like you alluded to earlier. So a lot of places are getting out of the just don't use it phase, like there is a lot of draconian policies, don't get me wrong, but I think there's also a broad recognition that they need to move faster than they are or than they have been. So when you're getting into a regulated situation, certainly internal policy needs to be the ultimate guide, but there are more and more companies adopting AI in a controlled, safe way. Often that can mean a custom system that uses an API in the cloud. But even more often, I feel like people want more, are indexing toward more safety. And I hear a lot about on-prem solutions where they'll essentially grab an AI. It's usually something like Llama, an open source model, train it, customize it themselves, and run it all on their own server. Now that will has trade-offs unless you have a big budget for compute. That's it's probably not going to run in the same with the same latency, the same speed that you see on the sort of public chatbots. Um, it's probably won't be as up to date as the stuff that's publicly out there, but it will be like very much your own. It will be your homegrown AI. I think people are getting more comfortable with that because there's points of view that are sort of developing on frontier models on which ones are good at what. And depending on your business, you can kind of have at least a loose framework of deciding, because once you do sort of go with something for a very custom solution like that, it's kind of difficult to, it's not impossible, but I mean it's a little more difficult to go back. Oh, actually, we wanted to use Mistral instead of Llama or something, like, well, we've spent a lot of time training on this particular thing, but again, it's a little more complicated than some of the more off-the-shelf systems, which turn the choice of model into a drop-down, essentially. Um, but it is a lot of folks are thinking about it in that sort of safe way. Now, you asked about non-regulated. Yeah, it's a little looser. I mean, but I wouldn't say loose, right? I mean, everyone's concerned about privacy. And although there's more privacy features than you probably think about public chatbots, like you can turn on do not train even for a public account, even for like a one-off individual account. That's relatively easy. Uh, it's not that much harder to create a API gateway to whatever chat bar you're using, whether it's a private closed
Mm.
system like OpenAI or whatever. And I feel like that's where a lot of folks are going. They just recognize the privacy concern and realize there's low overhead to addressing it in a simple way. It's much, much better than just saying don't use it because people will use it. It will seep into your workplace one
Yeah.
way or another, even if they're just to have it on their phone and they're copying and pasting or something, or just emailing answers to themselves. I mean, they're going to use it. So better figure out a solution that works for your company and your tolerance for privacy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we had a bank client and we asked them, so what are you doing in AI? And they said, well, we've been banned from using AI. And then they
Mhm.
said, but we have it on our phones and we use it there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
marketers and I guess any employee where there's a really good tool, they are going to, figure out a way to, to bend the rules to their advantage. So, which brings up, so what is your definition of a good AI empowered worker?
Well, I think a good AI empowered worker recognizes that AI is assistive. Number one, it is not a replacement for work or workers. It is a very, very good tool at some things, but it has weaknesses that some of which I don't think will ever fully go away. And I'm sort of alluding to things like hallucinations. We're doing a lot to mitigate those. Well, I mean, they're doing a lot to mitigate those, but it's sort of the nature of AI to generative AI to uh, kind of make stuff up. And I don't mean that in the non-factual stuff, in the sense of like I'm detecting a pattern in some set of data and I need to get something novel out of it. Sort of inevitably, I think there's going to be a non-zero amount of things that are novel and wrong because that's how humans work. Humans
Mm,
do have takes and analysis and they can misread things. And yes, they don't make as egregious mistakes and mistakes that would seem silly because we have experience with the real world and we know like there's some inherent things to being human that an AI just trips up on sometimes. It's just the way of the tech. But this is the thing about AI, like they're getting better at being precise about things, but they've always been great at the generative systems at getting the gist of a pattern.
mm,
Even when something's made up, it sounds right. And that's because it's kind of like again correctly read the pattern in a way like it's I can see how you thought X or Y, but you just got the facts wrong. So there's sort of that fact checking layer that still needs to exist. Often that's a human doing it. More and more the system itself is doing it. Honestly, even if you're just doing sort of raw prompting in your AI, telling it to double check facts when you're dealing with factual stuff is a good thing. Like it's not a guarantee that it's going to be perfect, but it's not a bad thing to get into. So sorry, this is a long-winded answer of asking you what an AI empowered worker is. It's it's recognizing those weaknesses and doing things like I mentioned, which is to say either using purpose-built apps, like you letting certain software do well at what it does and letting other software, whether that software is in your head or on your desktop, do what it's good at. And so that's what it is. So AI is just software. It's really powerful software. It's
mm.
really great at certain things, but use the right tool for the right job.
Yeah. So does that mean then that the marketers need to be reskilled or upskilled, or is there some formalized training that you think they need, or is the kind of learning as you're doing it going to be sufficient?
Learning as you're doing is really great. You can learn a lot to level set yourself from courses. It's a little self-serving because I offer courses and I'm happy to do that level setting. but learning as you're doing is that's how I learn. It's how a lot of us learn. And I think there is a certain value in getting sort of pointed in the right direction now, as you know, we were just talking about that there are so many apps out there and so many services, particularly for marketing. If you're just getting started in this, you probably are overwhelmed. And, folks like myself, and I'm certainly not the only one that offers classes, but like I would say, just sort of try to lean on someone who's going to point you not just in the direction of the mindset type stuff I was thinking about, but also like, what apps are out there? Like, and what do they do? There's good stuff that does Chat GPT, but specifically for marketing. There's stuff that's really, really good at all the levels of ACO, whether it's optimizing articles, whether it's optimizing sites, whether it's just giving you keyword suggestions, or even writing entire pieces of content. Again, not a thing I endorse doing out of the box. I don't think anyone should do content at scale that is not checked, at
Mm.
least once it's generated by an AI. And honestly, I think that's going to work against you if you did try that. There's a lot of sites that are cranking out what I would call AI slop, clearly not being checked, and Google's downranking them. Surprise, surprise. Your
Mm.
site might last a few days or a week, but it's like, oh, they can detect AI. They're pretty good at it. And again, Google, of course, has an interest in AI. They're not going to downrank it just because it's AI, but there is undoubtedly a pattern out there that even though not all uh, AI is slop, virtually all of the slop is AI created right now. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's a recognition of that in terms of like the systems are and how the systems work.
Yeah, it is pretty interesting that that Google can actually detect that. Certainly, as a human, you wonder, you get these funky emails, from Nigeria, and you read them, and you go, "This is definitely slop," and then you can see it on, on websites as well, and and that is definitely a challenge. One thing too, and it's sorry to kind of come back to a regulated industry. One thing that a lot of the regulators have, or the regulated industry forces, is that everything in marketing that's written has to then get reviewed by a lawyer. Do you see AI somehow being able to improve that I mean, it affects turnaround time and content. Do you think that AI can maybe somehow improve it, minimize the legal time, or minimize the legal review, or the latency that's involved in order to get something out the door?
Yeah, without being a lawyer, on a technical aspect, I would like to say yes. On a real world aspect, it's probably a ways out before that's reliable enough for law firms to really use in any kind of scalable way. I do think AI is a wonderful summarization tool. It's really, really good at just if you want a top level guide
Hmm.
on where to focus on, particularly when it's a time crunch, that's helpful. It's not going to be comprehensive, it can get better with training, being able to sort of know the work you're in, the corpuses you usually work with, the things you look for. That's going to help in sort of the pattern recognition it does. But when it's closer out of the box, it's going to be a lot less useful. Case in point, I used to work, like I said, at CoinDesk. We had a policy team, people who would typically look at policy and regulation. They look over court documents and official government documents often, and they would feed these into the AI to look for stories, which, in theory, that would cut down on some time. And it's okay. It does a decent job of summarizing it. The problem with that is that, particularly for legal reporting, is it's usually a nugget that isn't that obvious in a document that's the real story. That there is some classification that is made, for example,
Hmm.
that seems innocuous, but it's sort of snuck in. And a good legal reporter will catch that. It's like, wait, did they just say they're in this industry or they are doing that? And they'll like, be able to extract that story. I don't think AI is quite there yet. Uh, I think even if it was, it would need a great deal of training and
Hmm.
it essentially would have to get to know you, like and what the kind of stuff you look at for. I think it'll get there. I think it'll get there, probably get there sooner than we think. But for things like document review and finding those nuggets. I think at this point you still need the human, but it will be guided by AI. So you in in times where there's a time crunch, is going to be very helpful.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're right. I think it should have or or it would seem like it would have the ability to speed the process. Maybe there's at least remove kind of the dumb errors, like don't put the word XYZ into the document, or don't put this word
Mm.
into there. And so then you can get rid of some of the dumb errors. But yeah, I think you're right. I think especially for legal, when the risks are incredibly high, you still need that last proof for a human to actually read through it and make sure that there's nothing that it was missed by what the AI might have been able to do.
Yeah, it just depends on the kind of work and the expectation you're setting for it, right? So what I think we're mostly describing here is what I would call mission critical work.
Mm,
And for in the legal profession, it's probably mostly that. But there are probably other layers to workflows where maybe you just a quick summarization of something is enough. It might
mm,
not be something you serve to the client, but for some internal guidance, maybe that's okay. It really kind of depends on the whole context of this. Again, AI is a very useful assistant. But like I was saying earlier, like getting the gist of stuff, it's a very, very valuable directional tool. It's really powerful at that. It understands patterns. It can give you good direction on trends, on stories, on how things are manifesting in a particular data set. That data set can be really, really large, but it will occasionally miss some of the details.
mm.
And that's just a reality right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things that seems to me to be the really first killer app for AI was chat. And some of the chat bots, I think they are amazingly good. And then I hate to say it, some of them are amazingly bad. So tell us
Hmm.
about, what your opinions are on chat, and how AI, may or may not be a good use case, or maybe it is a good use case generally.
I really like chat, but I only really like it for certain things. So obviously, not all work is a chat or a conversation. But often a lot of work starts with a chat or a conversation. And sometimes when it's humans and everyone's time is pressed, it's not quite long enough. And I tend to be one of these personality types that wants to be very deferential to people's time. I don't like calling meetings unless I have to. I don't like extending meetings. I don't like even filling out a lot of time for me. I want people to go and do work. But that said, like meetings can be really, really great if everyone's engaged, if the purpose of the meeting is to generate ideas or brainstorm. Um, and that's very, very valuable. But it's hard to sort of coordinate that and make sure everyone is sort of in the same right zone to do that sort of meeting and get the most productivity out of it. The great thing about AI is that, well, you don't have to worry about its schedule. You don't have to worry if it's ever game for doing the brainstorming. It's always game for doing brainstorming. And you can just sort of continue that conversation of work with an AI beside you. And I think that's the best way to sort of think about it in its assistive role is it's not doing work for you. You're working alongside it. It's there as your work buddy to bounce things off of. And again, keep giving you that directional guidance, particularly when you start to sort of go off the rails and into the weeds on your own. And then you come back and, you can ask, what am I missing? What am I leaving out? Here's the
Mm,
task I'm trying to do. Here is some context around that task. And how is this work? And then it can sort of give you a good, essentially your own document review, which is
yeah,
pretty,
yeah,
pretty
yeah.
nice.
Yeah, I like those questions where you're asking, not just, hey, give me the top 10 things, but in it related to some topic, but give me the top 10 weirdest things, or the top 10 things that somebody hasn't thought of, or the bottom 10 things,
Yeah, or
and
the
to
top
be able
10
to
things
ask
that
it.
would appeal to someone who's nothing like me.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
or be more specific than that, but you know what I mean. Like, you don't want it to bias just to you.
Yep, yep, exactly. So now one thing that's kind of a challenge is privacy. And one of our clients, they have been using AI to summarize, they're in healthcare, and they've been using AI to summarize the customer satisfaction comments. There's, when you do a customer satisfaction survey, there's always like, some free form, verbatims that you can take. And
Right.
one of the challenges that they have is because they're healthcare, they have to be, they have to be very careful about any HIPAA information that might be included in that. And so I don't know, what do you tell us what your thoughts are on, how you can use AI and maintain, your clients or customers' privacy?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things we talked about earlier is just the system itself. So do you want an on-prem system? Do you want an API system? What is your policy? Certainly having a policy that everyone's adhering to, so they're not putting stuff in public chatbots. All that's important. But I think with regard to specific clients, particularly in the healthcare field, I think you really want to think long and hard about where the checks are in your system, and um, when you design a system or a generative a process that involves generative content, where are the parts that could leak out, right? So in the example you sort of mentioned about testimonials, and maybe that has personal information. Um, you could design something so that it can surface these things, but that whenever it does, it goes through a series of checks, some automatic, and if it makes it to the end of the process where you want to actually use that in, say, marketing content, there a human gives it a final once over, and I think that's going to create a bottleneck, certainly, but it's still going to save up resources further up the pipe. So it's really a matter of, like, as you design your system, like, where's your human in the loop? Where does it make sense so that work is minimized? Like, again, you don't want to panic on something that has not gotten to the part of the process that isn't public facing yet, right? No, obviously uh there's reason to be concerned about privacy internally too. I don't mean to, wash that away in terms of, like, well, someone sees something that is private to someone, just make sure it's not it's not a human, I
Mm.
suppose, but again, I do think you can do some automated checking and an automated AI on AI, and a few filters of that before it gets to a human review. So that way you can sort of really maximize your productivity and your efficiency in that process by reducing the human role as much as possible, but also recognizing that it is crucial. It's a crucial check before the last step. You just want it as close to the last step as possible.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, with all of the AI things that you've seen and all of the applications that you've seen, I know in our teaser we were talking about, the one thing being really the opportunity for good personalization. But what do you see as kind of the killer app, maybe in the next year or two, for marketing and AI, and how it can use it to really propel the marketing team forward versus the competition?
I've seen so many interesting video applications that I really think professional agency quality video is going to get really attainable really fast to a lot of folks. And I'm not even just talking about the generative stuff, although that's getting really good. So there's a lot of generative video that's coming out. There's a lot of excitement around things like Sora and Runway and all these apps. They're all great. I mean, in varying degrees of great, but it's kind of mind blowing the first time you use them.
Mm.
And that's exciting, but there's other ways to apply AI to your editing process, the way you gather footage. If,
Mm.
say, it's sort of user generated, there's ways to coordinate that, filter that. Again, not saying this is all done by an AI. This is a AI enhanced human process, but you can do that kind of editing and gathering and just production level. And you add generative into that. So Even though all these kind of like situational generative videos are amusing with Elon Musk, he has a spacesuit petting a cartoon dog or whatever, you can do that. But what I think it's mostly going to be useful for is B-roll. Often you want some B-roll that doesn't exist, and again, you got to be transparent in many cases about what's AI and what isn't. But you think about what image generators are now doing to stock footage services. I mean, B-roll, the video services are going to do the same thing to B-roll. And all of this is just going to get a lot more attainable, a lot cheaper, a lot quicker. And there's already some companies that are essentially building that into a platform where you can, pay a certain fee per month and get a certain number of videos based on prompts and footage that you give them. And they come back all professional. Really impressive stuff. So I think that's going to be a big disruption, big killer app, and that
Yeah,
agencies
and
are going to need to get on board with or get obsoleted by them, honestly.
yeah, and I interviewed a guy a couple weeks ago, and he is combining, high-end CGI with AI video creation. And one of the things, if you're in automotive, and one of the challenges that you have in going out in real life and actually shooting, video and whatever, is that you only have a certain time of day to get the absolute right light, and that's at dusk and that's at dawn. And because he can do everything now with CGI and AI, you have 24 hours of dusk and dawn because you just program it in with the lighting that you want. And he says that's one thing that has significantly improved the process, but also has speeded up the whole process. And then also the turnaround time for him to do an AI generated slight modification here or there. And so I agree with you. I think video creation, which is so time consuming, can definitely save a lot on using AI and whatever other tools there are, but combining AI with those tools to really speed that whole process.
Yeah, you just think about things that are kind of bread and butter in marketing, like sizzle reels and release videos and trailers and whatever else, like all of that is going to get so much easier. Just think of having, say you're doing marketing around an event and someone is on stage giving their talk and you want a video, a highlight reel of that talk, a 1 minute video of it like right away. Now you're going to be able to do that basically, not
Yeah,
quite drag and drop, but it's going to be like, okay, here's the thing, give it to me AI or AI powered service, and you'll have it within the hour, if not sooner.
yeah, yeah. Well, and that's just it. You'll have it within the hour or whatever time frame, but it won't be 28, 24, or 48 or whatever it is hours to have somebody
Yeah.
sit there and try and cut and paste everything together.
Yeah, and it won't be 10,000 a pop either.
Yeah, that too. That's right. That's right. Well, Pete, I could chat with you for a long time, and but really appreciate it. I do have one last question for you, and that is, what is your advice, your recommendations for an up and coming marketer as they're just getting into this space now? What would you recommend for them?
Well, AI literacy, certainly. Um, I would say as you approach AI and its assistive role in your career, don't feel threatened by it. Understand that you can master it, and you just got to have the right mentality around it. Like I said, it's you want to build AI into certain habits. I would say that number one. So doesn't mean you have to use it to take over your life or your workflows, but if you're struggling with thinking to use it or what you can use it for, do a few things to turn it into a daily habit. Number one, you could make ChatGPT or Claude or whatever your preferred chatbot. It could be Gemini, it could be Meta. Make that your homepage. Download the desktop app if there is one. Have it open all the time. Have a couple of go-to prompts. for some of your most basic use cases, some that you might want to automate. Honestly, that's the next step, which would be thinking about what are what are things that recur in whatever workflows you do that you don't really enjoy, that are probably tedious, and how do you automate them? And in some
Mm.
cases, there might not even be a generative component, right? There might even just be an automated tool that will help you do it, but that will get you again in the right headspace of like, oh, there's things I can automate. And then as you think about the things you can't automate or didn't think to automate before, like how much of your decision making is involved, like how much, quote unquote cognition, active cognition is involved in that process. And is there a prompt that could get it to a level of satisfaction where if that could become something you automate, is that good enough? And often this becomes like, well, yeah, email responses of a certain type. Like say, okay, great. There's apps for that. There's ways to identify that. There's, prompts for that. You can start putting all that together. And then before you know it, you're going to be automating good chunks of your workflow. You're going to find time freed up. You might even see more results in terms of these things because in a lot of times when you start using these automated processes, you start applying them to things you can't do, right? Because it's like, oh, I wouldn't have done that at all. But now I have an AI that can do it for me and gets me 60, 70% of the way there, which in this case is okay. Now, in a lot of cases, it's not, right? We talked about compliance, we talked about writing, we talked about
Mm.
public facing content. You kind of need it much higher than that. But for a lot of communication, which is, a lot of what marketers do, usually it's enough. Usually, and then they'll get you started. And then if a process looks promising, you, the human, can take over. So yeah, just start thinking about it that way, that it's, you can sort of baby step your way to having AI in your workflow.
What's interesting, because I agree with you, is early on, and early on is maybe just last year, a lot of universities were not allowing you to use AI in your studies. And yet, what we're saying is you come out of college and you want to start a new job, you have to be ready to use AI right there. And so it's kind of like it's almost like a reversal of what the universities need to do, is because they absolutely need to train their graduates on how to use AI to do everything they're doing except do it better and faster, and give them the tools and the experience to be able to do that. And so that when they come out, just like your recommendation is, when they come out, they're ready to really rock and roll with a lot of good capabilities that their competitors might not be able to have.
Yeah, with AI and universities, I mean, they need to figure out a way to teach to use AI as a partner and you write alongside AI, not have AI write things for you.
Mm,
Because to the point, like if you don't teach them how to do it, they're going to use it in the wrong way. They're gonna use it, and they're going to end up like having it. AI just wrote this for me, and that's not the right way to use AI. Not if you want to have anything that's worth reading it is. So, yeah, but there are ways to use it in a way that will help you write, help you speed things along, but isn't just doing it for you. And they should teach that.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And I think that the mindset of the professors, the teachers, and what have you are going to have to change, because they have to realize that these tools are there, and they have to help their students to be more successful, and learning these tools is going to be the way to do it. Well, Pete, thank you so much for participating, and really appreciate it. It's always a great conversation, and love talking about marketing and AI, and what's available and what's going to be out there. So, where can my viewers reach you, and if they want to learn more about you and your company?
Yeah, thanks. I would love it if you could subscribe to the newsletter if you're listening. So I'm at on Substack at mediacopilot.substack.com. And I also, as I mentioned, I teach AI classes. That whole thing about writing alongside AI. I have a whole process for that. Happy to teach it to you. You can go to mediacopilot.ai and just click on the learning tab there, and you can find all of the classes I offer. please feel free to sign up for one. And if you subscribe to the newsletter as well, you'll probably find a discount code in one of the many editions you'll get. So yeah, please check
Yeah,
that out. And guys,
fantastic.
thank you so much for the conversation. It's been fantastic. I really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
absolutely. Thank you, Pete. So, for the audience, please stay tuned for many other videos in this series of the backstory on marketing and AI. And also, please visit marketingmachine.prorelevant.com and find out more about my latest book. And if you like this episode, please rate it with 5 stars. Pete, thank you so much. It was great to have you on today.
Thanks, Guy. Hope we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely.